Now on Overnights,
I believe in reason and common sense.
Leith Van Onselen from Macro Business with the Treasury of Common Sense.
Common sense never goes out of style.
And here he is, Leith Van Onselen. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks, Phil. How about yourself?
I'm okay. Labor, as we all know, can't be trusted on immigration. But I know that you can tell us more about this.
Yeah, that's right, mate. Look, so if we take a little short trip down memory lane, in the lead up to the 2022 federal elections, this is when the coalition was still in government, in sort of December and January that year, we had the election in May 2022. He was then the opposition leader, but now Prime Minister Anthony Albanese promised to run a smaller immigration policy if they were elected. So, you know, he appeared in several newspaper articles saying that Labor's going to run a smaller immigration policy, etc. However, as we all know, as soon as they came to office in mid-2022, Albo convened the Jobs and Skills Summit, which was a couple of months after they got elected. And what that was a summit that was packed with a whole heap of lobbyists, etc., who are all about big Australia migration. And what he did was he then used it as cover to gain a really a fake consensus to ramp immigration to record levels. And we all know how it played out. Net overseas migration surged by about 1 million in 2 years to its highest level in history. It hit a peak of more than 550,000 in 2023, which is a level that was more than 200,000 more than the highest in Australia's history.
Right.
So Australia's highest net migration before the pandemic was in about 2008, and we had 315,000. Well, we hit 555,000 in 223. It was absolutely insane. And this surge in migration is obviously the main driver behind Australia's rental crisis. So in the last 5 years, we've seen rents absolutely soar on the back of this migration, and the typical Australian tenant, Phil, is now paying more than $10,000 more on their rent than they were, before the pandemic.
Yeah, I didn't realise it was that much. Crikey.
It's crazy. So, Cotality, which used to be CoreLogic, they estimated that rents have risen by about 45% since the pandemic. PropTrack says it's about 50, so it's a different organisation. But according to Cotality, the typical Australian renter is paying about, I think it was about $10,500 more per year on their rents than they were 5 years ago. So, it's a massive hit to everyone's cost of living, obviously.
Yep.
And renters tend to be poorer than tend to be lower income than homeowners. So they're really copping in the neck. Now, during its time in opposition and during its first term in office, the Albanese government regularly complained, and they attacked the former Morrison government or the former coalition government, that Australia had too many temporary migrants. And they claim that that Australia's migration system has become a temporary system, and they cited the fact that the number of temporary migrants in Australia rose from about 1 million in 2005 to 1.9 million just before the pandemic at the peak. And they said that this was, a, quote, huge source of our problems. That's from the former Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill, who's now the Housing Minister. And she also just said that it's having an enormous economic and social consequences. Well, guess what, Phil? The latest temporary visa data from the Department of Home Affairs has come out, and it's for the June quarter of this year. And it shows that the number of temporary visa holders in Australia has absolutely soared through the roof under Labor. So, as I just mentioned, Labor complained that the number of temporary migrants hit 1.9 million under the former government. Well, they're actually at 2.46 million now, right? So they've gone up 750,000 from when Labor was elected in mid-2022, and there are also 550,000 more temporary migrants in the country than before the pandemic. And this was a level that Claire O'Neill, the former Home Affairs Minister, and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said was far too much. They said that 1.9 million was far too much, and now we're at nearly 2.5 million. So this is absolutely crazy stuff. And Australia actually has one of the highest percentages, or if not the highest percentage, of its population as temporary migrants in the world. So currently 8.9% of Australia's population is a temporary migrant.
Yeah.
And that's up from 6.6% when Labor came to office in mid-2022. Just to put it into perspective, Canada has had a massive problem with immigration. They've had a similar rental crisis, had a huge surge in immigration after the pandemic. Their government, temporary migration in Canada hit a peak of 7% of their population. So it went to 7%. In Australia, it's about 9%. So we're so far above Canada. And the Canadian government has promised that in the next 2 years, it's going to manage its temporary migrant numbers down to 5% of the population. So we're currently at nearly 9%. Canada hit a peak of 7%, and their government has said, enough's enough, it's too many, we need to manage migration down. So, based on this single metric alone, the Albanese government has failed dismally in immigration because it has seen a blowout of temporary migrants in this country of 550,000 from the pre-pandemic peak of 1.9 million, which it ruthlessly attacked the former government on. Now, what's particularly concerning about this is before this year's federal election, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese appeared on ABC Q&A, and he claimed that the government was going to cut immigration to relieve pressure on the housing market, and he said he was going to cut it by reducing international student numbers, which he said, quote, was being abused. Right? So he said that we've got too many international students in the country. The student visa system's been abused. And the latest data from Department of Home Affairs, which has just come out, showed that there were 821,000 people in Australia on either a student visa or a graduate visa. And that's only fractionally below the all-time peak of last year. It's a couple thousand less than last year. But that itself is 166,000 higher than the pre-pandemic levels. So, again, under Labor, we've seen an absolute blowout in student visas and graduate visas. And the number of people on student graduate visas now comprises 3% of Australia's population. So nearly 1 in 30 people in Australia, as of the June quarter of this year, was on either a student visa or a graduate visa. And that's up from 2.6% of the pre-pandemic peak and 1.5%, back in 2012. So Labor has seen a massive blowout in temporary visas, a record blowout. It's seen a record blowout in student and graduate visas. And what's concerning about this, Phil, is that this week the Albanese government announces that it's going to raise the number of student visas in the country.
Yeah, I saw that last night. We were talking about an extra 25,000.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's insane. So we've already got the biggest share of student and graduate visas here on record. We've got the highest number of temporary visas in Australia on record. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese went to the last election that we've just had, promising to manage the migration intake down. He promised to manage the number of international students down, which is the highest in the world as a share of our population in the advanced world. We've got the highest share of temporary visas in the advanced world, and he promised to manage them down. So instead, he's gone back on his word. He's announced that he's going to raise the planning level for international students by 25,000 to 295,000 in 2026. So what this means, Phil, is that Australia's international student and temporary visa numbers, which as I said, are already the highest in the advanced world of all comparable advanced economies relative to our population, they're just going to keep increasing.
Yep.
So we've got Canada saying, look, enough's enough. The numbers are out of control. 7% of our population temporary migrants, we need to get that down to 5%. Well, we're currently at about 9%, and our government has said, you know what, we've got a rental crisis, we don't care. We're just going to bring in more. And we're going to bring in more. That's because the universities want it. The migration agents want it. All these lobbyists want more. So we're going to give it to them. Stuff the renter. Stuff the renter that's seen their rents go up by $10,000 in the last 5 years. We don't care. And the fact of the matter is, Phil, Labor has lied when it said it's going to run a smaller and less temporary migration system. It said that both before the 2022 election. It said it again before the latest election. And here it is, going back on its word once again, and it's going to deliver us an even more temporary migration system with even more temporary migrants and even more international students. And Australia's immigration program is going to be larger than ever, and it's going to be more temporary than ever. And as a result, Australia's rental crisis is going to become permanent, Phil. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Where can people find out more info on this?
Yeah, just, Phil, they can go to macrobusiness.com.au. I write on these issues daily.
The